are being lifted today. This is a massive reward for the people of South Australia who have done the right thing. In fact, they've done the right thing since day one, with very high levels of testing, QR code check-in, and of course vaccination. I think we'll get to 79% vaccination for those people 16 and over today. It's already at 88% with at least a single dose for those 16 and over. So I'm very confident now by the end of the year we'll be at that magical 90%. But a massive congratulations to the people of South Australia for doing the right thing, getting vaccinated, in fact behaving all the way through this global pandemic, and now a wonderful reward with scenes of reunification after such a long period of time. We know other states have had to have periods of whole of state lockdown so that they didn't have widespread community transmission that would overwhelm their health system. We've been fortunate in South Australia that that hasn't happened here, but it only happened, we only avoided it here, I suppose, because we had our strong border restrictions in place. But they are being eased today. We're doing it cautiously, we're doing it carefully. We're only allowing those people in that are fully vaccinated, so that means the 2 doses from those jurisdictions, and that's now been extended to all other states. And the good news is even the final LGA in New South Wales, the Byron Bay LGA, has got above that 80% today, so there are no restrictions on those coming from New South Wales, from Victoria or from the ACT. And of course, many people that are coming in, their LGA is now well above 90%, so not even a testing requirement and isolation when they come in. We are still requiring people to have a test within 72 hours of their travel to South Australia. We think this is a very important precaution to have, especially in these early days as we continue to drive our vaccination rate up. I think now on the check-in app, which is really in overdrive at the moment, I think we've now had 43 successful applications to that portal. So this means there's a lot of demand. People want to come to South Australia, and so I think it's happy days for our state going forward. I have also here with me today Igor Kukowski. He is the Executive Director of Global Sales and Distribution for Qantas Airways. They have been fantastic supporters of South Australia in the past, and very good news today is that we're going to have our first international flight with Qantas out of Adelaide for a very, very long period of time. So next month, Qantas will be having that flight Adelaide through to Delhi. As I said, we haven't had a direct flight out of Adelaide for a very long period of time. Qantas have backed us recently with the shorter range flights that they have been centring around South Australia. That's been a great boost for employment and options for travellers in and out of South Australia. But this is great news from Qantas, and I know most importantly the people of South Australia. Very happy scenes down here at the Adelaide Airport today. I'm going to pass over to Igor, who might like to say a few comments, I suppose, from the Qantas perspective. A number of Qantas executives have flown over to Adelaide today, very happy with the arrangements. We're the first of the non-COVID states to remove those border restrictions. We're doing it in a careful way, but very happy scenes here today. Igor.
Thank you, Premier. It's great to be here. A fantastic day for Qantas and for South Australia. So today we're starting flights, and with the opening of borders, we can get back to doing what we do best, and that's getting people back on planes, reuniting people, and actually seeing people reconnect, which we saw this morning, which was so fantastic to see. So with the start of flying, we're going to start with close to 100 flights this week between Qantas and Jetstar, and we're going to work our way through to close to 650 flights by the time we get to January, so around 160,000 seats into and out of Adelaide. So that's fantastic to see, and then as part of that, that also means that we're getting people back to work. So a lot of Qantas people who haven't been working are now back to work, and we'll see at the beginning of December, all of our teams stood back up and working again, which is, again, a fantastic thing for us to be able to do. I'd also like to thank the Government of South Australia, the Premier Marshal as well, for taking this step in terms of opening the borders. It's a really important step to reconnect Adelaide, South Australia to the rest of Australia, but also the world. And we'll see that becoming more and more important as more and more borders open. And finally, I'd like to say a big thank you to the people of South Australia. All those people who've gone out, rolled up their sleeves and gotten vaccinated. Without that, we wouldn't be here today. So a big thank you. Thanks.
How are flights going? Are they fixed it for
Yeah, sure. So flights, so we've had unprecedented almost demand. So what we saw as soon as the announcement was made around border openings, we saw a sort of six-fold increase in intakes for those flights. Today's flights are full, almost totally full out of Sydney and Melbourne into Adelaide. So we've definitely seen people respond. There's definitely a demand for that.
I just wait for that. Yeah, people voted with their feet on this one, haven't they?
They have voted with their feet, so we've seen flights very, very full out of Sydney and Melbourne into Adelaide today, which is fantastic to see, and that's why we're confident about adding more and more flights as the weeks go on.
Eagle, we've seen the sense of emotional reunions with family members, loved ones across borders. Can you tell us how emotional and important this is for your workforce, for your employees?
It's hugely important. Having worked for Qantas for a very, very long time, this has been one of the hardest periods we've been through as an organisation with all the people in it, and personally you can see how it's affected people. So getting back to a point where we can fly more, get all of our teams back working is hugely important. So, and that's quite an emotional thing, beyond just the work side of it, but just seeing people reconnect at work with colleagues that they haven't been able to work with for a long time. So it's really special.
What about the international flights? So one starting straight to Delhi next month.
Yes.
Are there plans to sort of flex up on that?
Well, so we'll start with Adelaide to Delhi next month, which is a really exciting development. And we've done it domestically, so we've seen that so far we've added 6 new routes since COVID, or compared to pre-COVID. So we're always looking for more opportunities in terms of where can we fly to, and the basing of the E190 aircraft in Adelaide is really helping us do that. So that's been a real fantastic opportunity.
And what kind of demand do you expect to have for that flight to Delhi?
So again, we've seen there's a huge pent-up demand. So in the first few days of sale, we've seen those flights start to sell out really, really quickly. So that's really pleasing. So clearly, lots of people want to reconnect and get back, either domestically, we've seen this morning, or internationally, we're seeing the same sort of response, which is great.
And initially, what's the price point for those flights? I guess given that it's only the one direct flight out of Adelaide, is it a higher price than pre-COVID?
No, well, it's a new flight, so from Adelaide to Delhi is going to be a new flight. So the pricing would be, I think, very similar to what we would have seen pre-COVID in terms of how people would have flown between Adelaide and Delhi.
What about domestically, people going forward? What are we going to see with price points now? Are we going to be expecting to see higher prices as you try and recoup losses from the pandemic?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think what we've seen, as borders have reopened and we started flying again in a couple of iterations, we've seen that the pricing stayed the same, and we're always focused on making sure that people are getting great value in terms of flying with Qantas. So we'll keep doing things like periodic sales and making sure we're getting some great prices out there, because it is about reconnecting today, but it's also about people taking a break, getting on holidays, and I think South Australia is a great place to do that. So I think we want to make sure we get people on board. Thanks.
Premier, can I ask you what your message is to all the people out there that say that we've opened too early?
Look, 88% of those 16 and over have now had at least one shot. I think by the time we get to the end of the year, we'll certainly be at 90% of those people in South Australia, 16 and over, 12 and over, being fully vaccinated. We know that as the vaccination rate increases, the transmission potential, the risk decreases. We've already seen the numbers coming down very significantly interstate, both in terms of new infections and in terms of hospitalisation. My strong message to the people of South Australia is now is the time to open the borders, to reunite family and friends, to create those business opportunities, to bring those customers into South Australia, and we've taken every precaution possible. For those people that are still a little bit hesitant, my strong advice is go and have that vaccination. There are tens of thousands of appointments which are now available for people to go and have that vaccination. Protect yourself and your family, your community, your workplace.
Please ensure that you provide any baggage or personal items and material. Suspicious items in the vehicle where sent should be reported to the nearest vehicle worker or the Australian Federal Police in the travel. A reminder that airport security...
Oh, look, we'll be at 79% tonight, but since that model was created, we've done a lot more with the people that are 12 to 16, so there's even a higher rate than what was originally envisaged in that model.
Premier, you said...
about kids under the age of 12.
Yes.
We're already hearing stories about some private hospitals turning children away from receiving care because they're not vaccinated, because they've implemented a mandate. This morning, a 2-year-old girl was apparently turned away from a private hospital because she's not vaccinated. Obviously, she can't get vaccinated.
Yeah.
Is this the risk we run when we don't have a stock standard mandate across industries in the state?
Well, look, we can't have a situation where people are required to be vaccinated in a medical situation like that. So there's certainly plenty of public hospital options for that patient. But what I can say is that we should be receiving advice from the TGA and ATAGI to the National Cabinet, and ultimately we'll be making an announcement with regards to vaccination for those people under 12. But at the moment, we only have 3 countries in the world that have made this decision. They've based it on clinical trials. So there's a lot of actual data coming in. The TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, will review that, and then we'll receive that advice at National Cabinet.
A lot of businesses are finding it hard to navigate the matrix of what close contacts will be and
Yeah.
how they can sort of prevent that from happening in their workplace. What sort of, I guess, guidance can you give them that they're not in this alone and they're not going to have to navigate that system by themselves?
Yeah, I think, look, we wanted to publish our entire thinking behind who becomes a close contact, who's a casual contact, and we wanted to provide that in a very transparent way. But we don't expect everybody to go through all of those spreadsheets, all of that data. They will be contacted if they do come into contact with a positive case. There will inevitably be positive cases in South Australia, but very much fewer people put into isolation and quarantine than we've had to put in place in the past. Today is the day we rule out statewide lockouts and also ongoing statewide lockdowns, and so we make those changes today. The transmission potential has massively fallen here in South Australia because of the great work that the people of our state have done.
Premier, when you look back at the last 18 months,
Yes.
how significant is this day for South Australia in this pandemic?
Look, this is a real pivot point for South Australia. These border restrictions have been harsh on so many businesses, so many individuals and families. So big relief today, but we're not out of the woods yet. We still want to climb that vaccination rate so that we can get to 90% and then reduce the restrictions in South Australia even further.
Can you guarantee to the hospitality industry, particularly the retail industry, that some of these domestic restrictions that are in place will come down in time for that December period, that real rush?
Well, look, it's really dependent on how we go in terms of the vaccination rate in South Australia. But I think we've been very clear in South Australia since day one. We don't want to keep any restriction in place one day longer than we need to. We're the first of the non-COVID states to open up. We're the first to have regional travel in South Australia, the first to get our students back to school, the first to get elective surgery stood back up again. We've had a prudent arrangement with regards to the opening of the borders today, so only fully vaccinated people. But I know that this is the right thing to do for our state at this point in time.
At the moment, the vaccination rate, which we were talking about this morning, is based on 16 and above. When are we going to switch to that 12 and above, which is what we need the 90?
For the 90, yes.
Yeah.
So they're both reported on a daily basis on the dashboard. So.
Can you give those, as I said, the hospitality sector, the retail sector, any certainty today that those internal restrictions are going to drop before Christmas?
I fully expect further reductions in restrictions in South Australia in line with the increasing vaccination rate. Now, I expect there'll be more people going out and getting vaccinated now that we've opened the borders. I think we'll get to 90% before the end of the year, and that'll be a very big relief, I think, for our entire state as we reduce that risk, but also open up our state even more than it is at the moment.
Premier, I believe you said that about 43,000 people applied to enter the state so far. Do they immediately get accepted to come in? And is there any indication about how long it will take for those 43,000 people to come in?
No, we don't have information regarding when they're going to be doing that travel, but 43,000 have already been processed through our portal, and they've got a range of various restrictions. So some people can come straight in, some people need to have a test before they come and a test when they arrive, and of course some people who are unvaccinated will still have to do quarantine. So that is all managed through that portal, but to date 43,000 people have been processed. I think people are just so delighted that they can finally come into South Australia, reunite with friends and families, look for those business opportunities, and importantly, customers coming back into South Australia to spend money in our economy. Let's not forget, if you look at New South Wales and Victoria, and in particular Sydney and Melbourne, these are our 2 largest markets for interstate travellers to South Australia. They make up about 70% of all of our volume coming into this state by dollar. for interstate travel. So this is a massive, massive additional multi-billion-dollar injection into our economy, which starts today.
That pre-arrival
Out of the 43,000, how many are they all approved, or how many are rejected?
Very few, and they wouldn't be rejected. Some of them might still be being processed, but the vast majority are approved. Some will have conditions associated with them, for example, so they're categorised, and so some will be saying, well, you can come in, but you need to test on arrival. Some, will have other restrictions put in place.
So have you had any unvaccinated people come in?
Oh, look, we've had that exemptions process in place since day one, and that just continues. So there will be people that are unvaccinated, they need to come into South Australia. We still will be making sure that we put all protections in place, but sometimes for compassionate reasons, we need to process those as quickly as possible. But fewer and fewer people around the country are now unvaccinated. Everybody can see the statistics interstate. This is by and large a disease of the unvaccinated. So when we look at what's happening in our hospitals, we look at what's happening in our intensive care units and those people going on to ventilators, it's by and large those people who are unvaccinated. So the best thing that we can do to protect ourselves and our family and our state is to go and get vaccinated, and there are now more options than ever before to have that vaccination.
That pre-arrival test, some states have already said they're going to be charging people to get that test before they come. South Australia's not, but do you think that might turn a few people away if they're having to pay $150 for a test in Queensland before they come here?
Well, look, that's a matter for other states. We want to make it free in South Australia. We want the testing rate to remain very high in South Australia. But what other states do, I can't really comment on. But we do have that requirement for somebody coming into South Australia to have that test within 72 hours of their departure, so that we can be doubly sure that opening the borders won't lead to adverse health outcomes for our state.
Do you think it could turn some people away if they're having to pay $150? It could be more than the cost of the flight to get there.
Well, I just make the point, we can't really tell other states what to do, and we do need to, particularly in the early days of lifting the border restrictions, remain reasonably prudent. So that's why we put that testing requirement in place. That's why we also are saying that people have to be fully vaccinated. But if they meet those criteria, then we are welcoming them with open arms, and there have been joyous scenes here at the Adelaide airport today. It's like a scene from Love Actually, with families and friends finally reunited.
The ambulance union has posted overnight that there's been more rounding at Flinders Medical Centre to people, elderly people, ranked over 5 hours. It's still happening the day before we open up our borders. What do you think about it?
Well, we have put a massive package in place to expand our emergency departments across South Australia. 9 emergency departments are getting a massive increase.
When people are still ramping 5 hours?
Well, look, I don't know the details of that one single case that you're identifying. 2 cases, sorry, Andrea. So 2 cases that you present to me today. I don't have those details. What I do know is that as a government, we're putting more money into our health system than ever before in the history of South Australia. We're massively upgrading our emergency departments in South Australia. And of course, on top of that, we have our $120 million COVID-ready package, which is being rolled out, and in fact I think we almost have half the number of additional beds in place as of today that were promised as part of that overall increase.
Excuse me, Premier, what have you got to say to fly-in, fly-out workers that are now quitting their jobs because to come back to South Australia there's a high risk of a 2-week quarantine period and unnecessary COVID testing?
Well, what we're doing is that we're making sure that people that are fully vaccinated only have to do that 7 days of quarantine, and we think that that's an important step in the right direction, and sending people the message that getting vaccinated is the very best thing that they can do for themselves.
Can I ask you on another matter, is Vicky Chapman still a minister?
So technically Vicky Chapman is a minister, but she does not attend cabinet meetings, and she has of course transferred by proclamation all of her responsibilities as the Attorney General to Josh Teague, who'll be sworn in as a cabinet minister at 2 o'clock today.
So she's a minister, but she doesn't have any portfolio?
Correct.
So why is she still considered a minister if she doesn't have any ministerial responsibilities?
Well, so I've gone through this yesterday and this morning on the ABC, and I'm happy to go through it again. The appropriate action is for her to stand aside, but she doesn't leave cabinet, she just doesn't attend it going forward.
And so what's the deal with her salary?
So as I was saying again this morning on the ABC, she's not retaining any of that ministerial bump. and so she's made that very clear to me.
But when you say retain, does that mean she'll receive it and pay it back, or give it to
Look,
charity?
I just don't have the answer to that technically, but what I know is she won't be retaining any advantage from being in the cabinet now that she's been stood aside during this period of investigation by the Ombudsman.
David Spears has put his hand to the deputy premier position. Have you had any other candidates?
No, I've not spoken to anybody else about this, but we will have a ballot in the party room on Thursday afternoon. So, look, there are some very capable people in our party room. I'm not sure who will nominate, but we would like to get this resolved very quickly before we head back to Parliament next week.
What do you think of this?
Yes.
What does he say about, what are his chances,
Oh, look, this is a decision of the party room. I mean, he's a highly capable person. We've got many highly capable people in our team. Of course, that's a decision for the party room. We'll resolve that Thursday afternoon.
What's your briefing on how the apps work today, given its detail, and what's your message joining on this experiencing problems with the apps?
Which app are you referring to? Yeah, right, okay. So what I can say is that the portal processing the applications to come into South Australia stood up extraordinarily well. It's now processed more than 43,000 applications since Friday afternoon. I think there have been a few moments when it might have been down for a matter of minutes, but this has been absolutely extraordinary. Could you imagine trying to process 43,000 separate applications manually? It would have taken weeks, if not months. This new portal is fantastic, and the vast majority of people have already had their response. There will be some people who are not vaccinated, which will take some further time to process, but the vast majority of people would have gone through almost instantaneously. Yeah, so VaxCheck is now up and running, and so people can go and download that to show their vaccination status. So there's a lot of technology around what is happening. We are now in line with what happens in other jurisdictions around the country, with people being able to show their vaccination status on their iPhone. Of course, you will need to make sure you've downloaded the appropriate app, but I'm told this is pretty simple to do.
I want to just ask you on one more issue. Do you see this as the deputy premiership? Do you see this as potentially a way to ease those simmering tensions between the two factions? Do you think it might be wise for the Liberal Party to have someone from the Conservative side as a deputy?
Oh, look, I just don't buy into those arguments whatsoever.
Why not? Would it not help with the party?
I just think that's something that political commentators like to talk about. The reality in our party room is very different.
And can I just confirm on
Be serious, so that those issues aren't actually real?
Well, I've chaired the Cabinet. Ever since we came to government, there has never been a vote in the Cabinet since we came to government. We just don't resolve issues like that. So I just don't buy into it. And I should know, I'm in the Cabinet. Well, I'll leave the analysis to you guys.
maybe there hasn't been a vote with the moderate dominant.
No, that's not the case at all.
Can I ask you just again on Vicky Chapman's salary?
Yes.
So is she going to receive the full ministerial salary and then pay it back?
I just don't have that detail. I'm not trying to be difficult, but I just don't have that detail. What I know is she's made that commitment that she won't be retaining any of the ministerial bump that she would receive if she was doing that job full time.
Justify someone still being a minister. She's not doing the job.
Well, for the reasons that I've outlined yesterday, this morning on the ABC, and only a few minutes ago.
But how can you justify it that in any other workplace, if you were stood aside from your job, you would get paid a lesser salary, and then if you were found clear and you got that job again, then you'd get the extra money after that. So
that's actually not the case, Stacey. Look, the reality is no minister stands aside during an Ombudsman's inquiry. We've only made this decision simply because the Auditor General is within her portfolio area. So if another minister had an investigation, they wouldn't stand aside. In this case, we have, but it's certainly not appropriate for her to leave Cabinet and resign that position.
To be, sued by workers who don't want to get vaccinated and might lose their jobs. What do you say to those people?
No, I just don't think those fears are founded on any substance whatsoever. I can't think of a situation where somebody has been able to successfully sue an employer because they've been asked to get vaccinated. So I don't think there's any case of that that I'm aware of anyway.
So you think, yeah, it hasn't happened yet, but they're concerned the workplace legislation doesn't really protect businesses who might choose to introduce the vaccine mandate for their workers.
But as I said, I just don't see any evidence of that. Look, the reality is there are some people that want government to take the responsibility of making everything mandatory. There are plenty of other employees that want us not to do that. There are skill shortages in some sectors at the moment. There are still some people that are unvaccinated here in South Australia. If we made it mandatory for all workers in South Australia, we would lose employment, we would lose those skills, and in many sectors this would undermine their capacity to trade.
So there's suggestions from social media that Byron Bay has now reached 80%, but SA Health's actually not accepting applications because they haven't updated any of that data. What do you know why that would be?
No, I mean only at the top of this press conference I said that they're all in now, so yeah, that decision's been made.
This morning on radio you said that Vicky Chapman wouldn't be receiving extra money and then paying it back. Why has that changed now?
Sorry, say that again.
David Bevan asked you this morning, I think his words were, so there's nothing dodgy happening here. She's not going to be receiving the extra money and then paying it back or giving it to a charity. And you said no.
No, I don't think there's any suggestion that she'd be paying it to a charity, no.
No, but paying it back.
Well, look, I'd have to look at what he asked, but the point that I'm trying to make very clearly here is that Vicky Chapman will not be retaining any of that bump. How it technically operates, I've got no idea, but certainly there's no suggestion, as I said on the radio this morning, that she'd be paying money to a charity.
Right, she might be paying. Last one for us.
Possibly, yes. All right, thank you very much. Seem a little bit. Why is it so? Is it really?